Call the November 9th, 2023 Lake Mills Public Works Board to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Picard,
Here.
Mr. White, Mr. Waters,
Here.
Mr. Polachek, Mr. Beagle, Ms. Schmager.
Here.
Thank you.
So we have,
Yeah, we have quorum. 3 out of 6 is quorum.
We don't have quorum to make a recommendation on wastewater. You need 4.
Really?
yeah,
Because the town,
Need
the
4.
town makes it 6, makes it a
Okay.
6-member board.
right.
Okay.
Okay. Before we get started, I just want to make, unless somebody objects, move director's report from the top of the agenda to after the Lake Mills bicycle plan. If there's no objections, we'll do that way. Okay, moving on then. Corrections and/or approvals of the minutes of October 10th.
I will move approval for the minutes of October 10th, 2023.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved. Item 4 is questions and public comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to what is labeled item 6, discussion update yard waste center site.
Dave, could you pull up presentation number 2, please? So I did start canvassing the town. We were looking for areas that would be most beneficial for a yard waste site. Dave, could you back up a slide, please? One slide. And we locked into 2 areas that we thought would best serve as a yard waste site that would allow good access in and out, that would allow enough room for bins for the different types of yard waste that would be dropped off. One is at the end of CP Avenue to the south, and the second is where we currently have a defunct substation, electrical substation. It is across the street from our street department. Slide 2, please, Dave. So this is the one at the very south end of CP Avenue. Reasons why this is advantageous is simply because of the room. We have lots of room to work with. I would envision clearing the topsoil and getting down to a firmer material, soil material, and then put in a bed of gravel, 1 1/4 inch perhaps, and then we'd use the prefabbed concrete blocks to create the bays. But with so much space here, we can easily create an in and out for traffic. As for security, we are looking into, I believe we'd have the funds for a chain link fence, and that right now is what we'd have the funds for, is just the fence. But then we would discuss ideas, and I'd propose to the board just having this yard waste center open maybe 3 days a week, or maybe just 2, one day in the weekday and then on the weekend. That way it'd be easier to monitor. We do have a problem right now at the current site with nefarious things being dropped off, mattresses, sometimes an appliance or 2. I've driven by and found a commercial contractor once in a while trying to drop things off in there. So I believe one way to combat that is, for one, having a fence and denying access except days a week and control and monitor it. Slide 2, please. 3, please, Dave. I'm sorry.
Are we talking about a card security style system, or just monitored via cameras for 3 days a week? What is the plan for the monitoring?
I did not bring up cameras yet.
Okay.
We certainly can entertain that. Then we have to look at cost.
Yeah.
At site number 1 there, the proposed site number 1, it would take a bit more logistical work to bring cameras down there. There's no infrastructure for that yet, but it can be done. But to have a decent camera system, it'd have to be wired in, so.
What about a card system, like a pass you get from here you have to
Yeah.
sign up for pass?
Well, we have that at the current site, and it's not working that well.
Well,
No.
we don't have that.
She means like a gate.
Oh, I beg your
Gate.
pardon.
A gate, like where you have a pass, kind of like, I think
Yeah.
Johnson Creek has that. Well, it was one of the things we had talked about early on and we were brainstorming
I
possibilities.
love that idea. That's a bit more of an expensive option, but if the funding were there, absolutely. I could build Fort Knox for you. But yeah, absolutely, we could look at, I mean, if we had a card access, we could keep this open all week, then just, access per resident. But right now, I did not entertain that. I did not see the funding for that,
Okay.
so. We do have the funding for a fence, perimeter. And maybe going in the next year, we could find the funds for our camera system. But I would love to look into a gate lock system, so. So Site 3 is, like I was saying, this is the old substation. If we wanted to entertain that area, it does already have a fence perimeter. It would be a little easier to bring cameras in there because we'd probably post them at the street department across the road. There is currently infrastructure there for electricity, for our electric system, grid system, but my electric foreman tells me it'd take them about 2 weeks to remove all of that. But the downside to this area is just its location. It would be nice to get out of the industrial area with traffic coming in and out that could really create some congestion problems on CP Avenue. So that is there are a couple of the cons for that area. But that's where we're at right now. I'll explore other areas as I'm directed. But
For this site, what kind of prep work would be needed for the base? Is there gravel already there?
there is a road base there. So it would be very minimal work we'd have to do for the driving area. So,
Randy, what's the size difference between Site 1 and Site 2?
Site 1, the size is unlimited. We can expand as much as we need to. I do not have a square yardage for you, square footage for Site 2. I'd have to get that dimension.
So do you know if they're roughly the same size or?
Well, again, we can build Site 1 to whatever dimension we like. Size 2 would have, I would believe, plenty of room.
640 square feet
Dwayne's thinking 640 square feet.
is what is in the fenced area, but some of
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I did a 129 by 192, but some of that area is currently being used as storage, so it's probably going to be limited to some degree.
Well, we would move that, the stored materials back over to streets, more than likely. And there's 2 interior fences there that could be taken down to make that whole area one perimeter.
To give us an idea, do you know how big the current space is?
No, 1 second.
it's about 140 by 60 feet from the property line, probably 65 from the street.
The lot we own on South CP Avenue is over 6 acres, so pretty significant.
Plus the right-of-way
Right.
of CP Avenue. So quite a bit more room on the South CP Avenue site. One of the concerns in the past with the site across the street from the Public Works Building was the concern that if they don't have access, it'll be like Stony Road where people will just drop off material outside the fence. And that has been a concern in the past for staff. And so we'll have to find a way, if that is an option, we'll have to look at a way to kind of stop that from happening.
So if it's Site 1 at the end of CP Avenue, that will not happen?
I'm not going to say that.
So if that happens, it's likely to happen either place, correct?
It is, however, CP Avenue at the current condition would be a dead-end road. Material that would extend, like it does now, into Stony Road is into a 2-lane traffic road. On CP Avenue North, by the treatment plant, you'd have that same condition. If someone would put it outside of the South CP area, you'd be south of the well. Light year on a dead-end street, so if that's there, not ideal. But
The big difference is currently there's no gate, no fence, no closure of it. In both of these sites, I assume you would both have a closure of it when you don't want people to dump stuff. That's a big difference compared to the current site.
I'd like to add for a point of consideration, the street department's area has a lot more visibility. There's industries around there. We have a treatment plant right next to that. So it would be a little more difficult to just drop things off outside of the fence. So-
Yeah, it would be, just visually, people would be more leery about doing so just because of the area of
Yeah.
that site versus the dead-end street.
But we are looking at, cameras are a possibility also at both sites, so.
And then a follow-up, if we, for instance, use the site number 1, what would the city use site number 2 for and the current site for in the future? Any plans for that?
We don't have plans for it. We'd retain ownership of it. It could be used for a future expansion of, it could be used for the sewer treatment plant in the future. It could be used for storage of public works material. Any number of things. It's immediately adjacent to the sewer treatment plant. So if we end up retrofitting that site for the future treatment plant, then, it may be another expansion area in the future, if we needed additional space there, to further draw out the life of the existing footprint.
in addition to the street department storage, it would also be the park. Obviously, the parks is in that building as well. And so expansion of parks material and other storage would probably occupy some of that space pretty quickly once the electric utility is.
Mm-hmm. Alternatively, if we have, yard waste can be moved as long as we have some place to move it to, where we do a yard waste drop off. So, South CP, if we were at South CP and we got a great offer, for that land for a development or something, we could then move it to the substation, lot as well. They're not overly intensive uses of the land here, so you can react in the future to changing circumstances.
Any other questions?
Do you have a recommendation on the site that you feel is better for short term, and then I'm not sure we had talked about long term, maybe partnered in with the strategy on this water treatment plant, but if you talk about fences and putting in infrastructure, is it considered possibly a more permanent location? So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
It's hard to advocate for either one. There's the pros and cons pretty much outweigh. One reason I'd be reticent about the substation site is for what Drake brought up. If we do expand that sewage treatment plant, we would probably most definitely want to use that space for something related to that. But on the other side, so much of the infrastructure is already there for that area. And then the south CP Lane site, we just have so much room. We could use some of the rest of that acreage for storing the processed yard waste. So, I'm sorry, I know you like a clear, definitive answer, but I just feel that they pretty much, there's no wrong answer in either of those, as I see it, so.
So you said 3 days a week, open 3 days a week. Would that be staffed or unstaffed?
Right now, it'd be unstaffed. We could work out perhaps what it would require to staff that, but.
Okay. If it's unstaffed, it may not solve all of the problems the current site has.
Yes.
Yeah, we can also explore the cost of a card system gate. And maybe it's a proposal that we could cost out for the city council to consider for use of our remaining American Rescue Plan, our Rescue Plan Act funds as well. Or we can make it a budget option in the future. So there's ways to control. I think even an uncontrolled site at the South CP is going to improve conditions over Stony Road just because of where it's located right now. It impedes traffic as soon as it fills up too much. So we would still be solving one of the issues that we're facing, not all of them all at once, but we wouldn't be worried about it encroaching into the traffic lanes as much as we are now.
I guess I'd like to see a couple recommendations maybe before our next meeting. I'd like to see it open 7 days a week like it currently is. And I'm leaning more towards the south site. Is there a way to write up a proposal that this is what it would take to be open 7 days a week? And then if you have a 3-day solution, maybe we can understand what the 3-day solution is and what type of technologies you would have in each of those to best serve the needs of the city and the citizens of the city. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm concerned also about if you go to 3 days a week, a lot of people you're going to get a lot of calls. Because a lot of people like using it when they're doing their yard work, as opposed to when it's open.
That is a luxury this town enjoys.
Yes.
Not too many communities have access 7 days a week, so.
Well, Johnson Creek does.
Yeah.
And they have a card system.
Yep.
Yeah.
But absolutely, Mr. Waters, I can write up a proposal we'll focus on the south site, what it would require to develop that, and.
Was there enough direction there, or did you need anything
Sir?
else? Was there enough direction in what I just said, or was there other details that maybe you need more direction from
Do
this
you want me
committee?
to look into also staffing this site?
I guess that would be priced into the option, yeah.
Okay. Then certainly. If I have any other questions, I can contact you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anything else on this subject? If not, we'll move on to item 7, discussion recommendation on John's disposal contract amendment for 2024. In our packet, we had a letter from John's requesting a 3.6% increase for 2024.
This is largely procedural, but to keep the Public Works Board up to date, the increase is within the standards of the contract. So annually, we bring this to Public Works Board before taking it on to City Council just to obtain a recommendation. But it is within the contract that we have with John's Disposal for their allowable increase.
Go ahead.
I do have a question. I was thinking about I don't know, I'm assuming historically we've had a small increase year on year. I ask that every time, so I've just, FYI, I'm curious what the history of increases have been with all of the services, and so 3.6 didn't surprise me. What caught me as just an question of interest is the big bulk pickup. And just curious on utilization, cost, what cost that carries as a part of the overall disposal program, and how that is looked as being successful, not successful. I just know I don't see a lot of it used in my neighborhood, just, visually. Now, perhaps I'm missing it, and I'm not counting it, but I notice it's not utilized a lot. So, but yeah, we're all paying for this great service, and are there other options, and is it material? Is it a big portion of the amount that we are all paying for the refuse service? And so it's just a question regarding how, given there's an increase, if we were to just put that aside and say we're going to find a different way to do bulk, would this 3.6% increase be a 3% increase? Would there be no increase? Or is it kind of all factored in together, and that's not something that we've actually carved out and looked at separately?
To my knowledge, we haven't carved it out and looked at it separately. All costs of it are passed on to the so it's a pass through. The city doesn't pay for service. It's a charge on the utility bill for recycling and refuse.
There's a little bit of state money coming in, I believe, right?
There's a recycling grant that we receive annually as well. Okay. Okay. So 3 years ago, Dan says we went to RFP and they changed how bulk pickup was done. They went from it being once a month for everybody to once a month, but as scheduled by the users. So, and that was done to reduce traffic on the roads and reduce their vehicles being on our roads, which can lead to wear and tear on our infrastructure. So 3 years ago was when we added recycling on a weekly basis.
Instead of every other week.
I'm just thinking about the increase in, if I think about the breadth of increases, we had water, we've got light, now we have disposal, we're going to have sewer. It's just, I'm just curious on being creative and thoughtful and mindful about, are there ways to find opportunities where we can modify a program that still provides adequate services in a different fashion. Like somebody has a once a month bulk and they use it every month. That's different than somebody who never uses it. So I'm paying for the 12 people or whoever, everyone who pays for it, who are using it once a month. And so I don't know. I don't know if we have any data regarding the utilization and how it is. I'm just asking the question, are there ways to be creative? And this one here I know is not a real big dollar expense for our citizens, but it's still a question that I think is, I'm trying to explore, just pick at a little bit.
It is well below the cost of living adjustment for this year as well, so.
I know, but it's still an increase. And I'm using it as an example perhaps because I'm just trying to, I look at all the parts of what we're, and like recycling and the refuse, but then we had the bulk, and I just thought, is that, just curious what the utilization rate is and what percent of the cost of our overall is embedded in that big refuse, and is there a different way of looking at it? That's all.
Mm-hmm. We could ask them. They schedule it directly through John, so we don't collect that data, so I can reach out to them and ask how much utilization we have of bulk pickup and report back. And then I'll ask the question of if bulk pickup wasn't included in the contract, would there be a reduction in the cost of the contract?
And then I'm not sure how you pick that up for the I don't know what the alternative is the questions. I was just I'm trying to understand what's embedded in the cost, and if there was a component that was costly that we could think of how to make it.
Johns could charge for bulk pickup.
That's essentially, the alternative would be that you would call Johns and they would give you a price for what they're picking up from you.
And they would bill you.
Mm-hmm. And they'd bill you, the user directly.
But I don't know if it's a material part of the overall, and if you actually get a better rate because you've included bulk. That's, you might actually have a better rate. If you take bulk out, your rate might go up because you're taking away a service. So I don't know the answer to that. It was just more of a question. Since it was an increase, I'm trying to find a way to not get an increase.
It would be good to every once in a while have a discussion with Johns and say, is there anything we can change to make your process more efficient and therefore less costly for us? I think that's part of what happened with changing it from driving around the whole city once a month doing bulk pickup versus calling them to schedule it, it was more efficient for them and therefore lower cost for us.
Yeah, I don't recall when the contract expires, but it would probably be something to bring up when we're looking to
That's fair.
go to RFP or renew the contract again. I'm not sure, I'll read the contract again, but I'm not sure what our ability to adjust level of service is while we're within that contract term.
That will be a good time before renewal to approach the subject. I don't think it was a question regarding how to
Sure.
wait to look at cost components, especially when there's an increase. And so I don't think it's worth the time to come back with additional data on this. I think it'll be timely when you look at the contract.
Okay.
And I guess to speak on that recycling, 3 years ago when that kicked in, I guess my personal experience was, we don't need to do that. Every 2 weeks is good enough. But now, I know I fill up that recycling can every single week, and I don't know if the habit has changed, that it's like, I need to recycle these things, and now all of a sudden I'm filling up that can, but it's nice to have that weekly pickup where 3 years ago I didn't think it was necessary.
People are especially grateful around this time of year as well. A lot more cardboard deliveries November, December.
Yeah.
I like not having to try to remember which week is the correct week.
So on this note, I'm going to go ahead and move to approve forwarding this to City Council for the review.
I second.
Motion and second to forward to City Council for review. Any further discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Mr. Picard?
Aye. Motion passes. Item 8, discussion recommendation wastewater treatment plant improvement project.
So Travis from Strand is online if we have additional questions for you. I forwarded an email with some information to each of you with the cost breakdown of the phases. So phase 1, 2, and 3, which adds up to the 50 million and the 50 million for a new plant on a new site. But remember, those numbers don't include, do not account for inflation in that calculation. So that was the question that was outstanding at the last meeting, a breakdown of the cost by phase if we stayed at the existing site. If there's additional conversation, I don't believe we can forward a recommendation tonight because we only have 3 members. So we can have discussion, but I don't believe we can have action.
Very good. Is there any discussion or further information that board members would like to see before making this decision in the future?
I think that information helped a lot. I guess I'm good with having that discussion maybe at our next meeting where we have a quorum so that we can make a recommendation on moving forward.
And then I'll try and prepare information as well, but we'll want to start having the conversation as well about discussing a rate increase here in the future. Just the longer we wait, the more we're going to have to do. So even if we don't make, as we're making this decision, we probably want to get going on that one to start building capacity to pay for some of these things and get our rates where they need to be so that we're eligible to take revenue debt to borrow. So that conversation will be coming up here as well.
I have some questions about the information provided in the email. Did those costs include debt service?
I don't, like the cost over the 20-year period that we would borrow to fund.
The borrowing costs, the interest costs.
I think that would be the cost of what we would have to borrow. I don't believe it is it's the total cost of what that loan would cost us over the life of the revenue debt. So no, I don't believe those numbers do. It would be what we have to borrow at the time that we complete that work.
Right. Okay. And then I'd just like to make a comment that if you spend $10 million 20 years from now, even if it costs more dollar-wise due to inflation, it's still more cost-effective than spending that $10 million today. Because let's, as a exercise, imagine that the inflation rate is 3% per year for 20 years. And also, let's for this exercise say that wages also increase 3% per year for 20 years. 20 years from now, that $10 million is not as big of a number. The $10 million 20 years from now is a smaller number in people's eyes because everybody's making more. Inflation is not a factor in considering the cost of a future upgrade. It's a non-issue because everything moves up together. In actuality, the reverse is true. The cost, if I said, give me $1,000 and I'll pay you back tomorrow with an extra $1, not a bad deal. If I say, give me $1,000 and I'll pay you back with an extra $1 20 years from now, that's not a good deal, right? It's not as good of a deal. Money doesn't have the same value year on year on year. It varies by time. Mm-hmm. And that's what the net present value calculation does, is takes into account the value of money over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some assumptions there that we are unknown still, right? There's we don't know what borrowing costs are today versus when we would do it in the future. Wages and inflation aren't always correlated 1-to-1. So, the time value of money, $10 million today is worth more than $10 million 10 years from now. That's certainly true. But there's factors, I guess, to consider that, may not be as cut and dry, from that perspective. So, and we don't know what rates will be. Rates could be lower than they are today 10 years from now as well. So you have to weigh it,
Right.
and
So yes, things don't always don't move all in sync, and including the cost of borrowing. But if you just look at the generalities that I painted are true. This email makes it sound like the two cost the same amount. And if you did a net present value analysis on these two options, they would not cost the same amount. And last month, the rate impact page in that report, which I do happen to have here, over a 15-year period, 2024 to 2039, not only was the ratepayers paying more over that 15 years, but at the end of that 15 years, the rate increase was 130% for existing site versus 159% for new site. So the rates would continue to be higher in the future. I see no other way than, it's 50 either way is not, to me, an accurate analysis. Taking the cost of future money versus current money is the proper way of doing the analysis.
You would have to account for inflation, though. It's not going, in today's dollars, they're both 50 million. With inflation adjust, it could be 60 million versus 50 million.
So if I decided today that I'm going to need a new car 5 years from now, that new car might cost 20% more 5 years from now. So would it be better if I bought that new car today, and then I wouldn't have to pay that extra 20% 5 years from now?
Do you need the new car today?
No, but I can put it in storage for 5 years.
I would probably reject the premise of that comparison. I don't think that's an accurate representation.
The 50 million for the new plant, what does that give us for population equivalent?
I think it takes us to, Travis, do you remember? It takes us to our 20-year growth, 30-year growth.
Or is it the 30,000 population equivalent?
That was in the last presentation, I think.
So yeah, I'm looking at the slides here. That would get you to
the end of the charts are 30,000 population equivalent.
yeah. It's not that much.
So here's the,
These are estimates.
there's the estimate.
I don't know where else it is in last month's, other than that number.
Yeah, the new plant would be designed for your 2042 population projection, which would be 9,152 people.
And that's true of also for the 4 phases of the existing plant?
For phases 1 through 3, that is also true. You would have some additional redundancy available in the oxidation ditches as well. So it would actually be somewhat higher capacity than that projection.
Okay. Thank you.
I have 2 things that I would like to have included as a part of the discussion when we have the quorum at the next meeting. I would be interested in understanding if there are any estimated operation costs that would be different comparatively between the 2 different scenarios and then also to today's environment. And would we require different expertise? And does that come at a cost, kind of looking at, especially if we were to move to the existing site with new technology, what would that look like? And so that kind of gets to how do we, it's like we have the costs here for the build, but then what are the costs for actually running and maintaining both of the options? And then also any risks and how we would mitigate them. Especially given that, there are a lot of variables in making this decision, and so it doesn't come without risk. And so what would the mitigation plan be, and what is our confidence around being able to mitigate the risks and the I would say the challenges, how steep of a challenge that we would run into with any of those risks.
What type of risks are you thinking about? I mean, environmental risks or?
Anything that would be of concern, a risk, closing of the particular vendor that we select or the solution that we select. If we would go with AGS and AGS goes bankrupt, that's a risk. How do we mitigate it? Do we have our pieces, parts, and expertise to help us figure out then how to move forward? I mean, what risks that are embedded in moving forward, I guess, and then how would we mitigate them? I'm really looking at the big hitters. I mean, I think it'd be important for us to understand how we would, when we're facing this, what we might face, and then how comfortable are we in being able to mitigate whatever risk we encounter.
Regulatory is probably the biggest risk. Yeah.
Or there could be expertise. I mean, sometimes decisions are made and it's a certain type of computer software, not so much in today's environment, but I've run into issues where our company had chosen computer software and then the language kind of became obsolete, and so to find programmers to help you to figure out how to program improvements in your software become really challenging, and the expertise is hard to find, so of course then they're twice as expensive, and so I don't know what the underlying risks are because I'm not familiar with wastewater treatment plants, but I think that would be something of interest given the amount of spend that we really have a good keen eye and thought into what we are really embarking on with the different options.
I just want to clarify on the O&M cost information that you're looking for. I think you were asking for a comparison of O&M costs. Are you looking to compare current operation versus operation under the new treatment system, or are you looking for comparison of staying at the existing site versus moving to a whole new different site?
Well, I believe we have two options. I think one is, I don't know,
It's the existing site with the AGS, and then the second option is going to a
Wastewater.
completely new site.
Yeah, so the comparison between the two
Between the two.
options, Travis.
Okay.
Rather than compared to how we're operating today.
Yeah,
Since we know
that's not-
since we know we'll be changing.
although if it costs 50% more to run a new operation, I think that'd be worth noting if there's a material increase in the amount of labor it requires. So I think there is some relative comparison to today, so we understand what additional operational expenses we need to make sure that we're taking into consideration. So I think there's a little bit of both, but I think it's important. I would like to see them comparatively to the two options as well.
We'll try and quantify it. Some of it, one piece that'll be difficult to quantify is it staying at the existing site for a certain period of time. We'll be maintaining two different treatment options, so there will be an expertise level of maintenance that we'll have to maintain. So we'll try and quantify that for the next meeting.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Good questions.
One last question is, the Phase 3 effluent pumping and force main, earlier on, a year ago, that was like a must-have ASAP, and last month, it sounded like a more of a, when it's required is the right time to do that. And I don't understand, if Travis, you could explain what the driver of that is, when is that likely to be required due to effluent limit changes?
Sure, yeah, the primary driver for that was the phosphorus limits, and the city has successfully gotten into the multi-discharger variance, which has bought some time on that particular limit. Those phosphorus limits, even though you're in the multi-discharger variance, they do go down a little bit every 5 years. So, and then eventually after 15 year it expires, and you would need to, for sure have a compliance option. So that was the primary driver for changing outfalls, was the phosphorus limit, but also just in general, the Rock Creek is always going to have stricter limits that get imposed on it, and it's somewhat of an unknown. It's somewhat of an unknown what might happen there, and if something were to come up where you'd have stricter limits on the Rock Creek, it would be beneficial. It could possibly be beneficial to have that Crawfish River discharge. So, that's why it was kind of a hot item initially, because there was some doubt whether the city could get into that multi-discharger variance. But now that you've successfully gotten into it, as long as the DNR continues to allow that as a compliance option, that does buy you some time where it could possibly be pushed down the road 10 to 15 years.
That's very helpful. Thanks, Travis. It's good. Appreciate that thorough explanation.
Good.
Anything else, anyone? Okay. We'll move on then.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is this presentation discussion on 2005 Lake Mills Bicycle Plan.
Okay, while Dave is pulling that up, this plan I put together, I simply went through the 2005 bicycle plan page by page and pulled out what I thought were the key takeaways and components, conclusions, ideas that were referenced in it. So as we're going through it, everything that's in it is from the 2005's bicycle plan. So it doesn't necessarily reflect what opinions may be if we pursued an update of it, but I wanted to give a base of where we are right now with what our currently adopted bicycle plan is. So the goals identified in the 2005 plan, it identifies the needs within our existing boundaries and proposes near-term improvements based on those needs, and it's building on a plan from 1996. It identifies 5 different users: visitors, children, destination-oriented cyclists, recreational cyclists, and then pedestrians. So I'll take you through kind of how each one is kind of defined. So visitors are those who are most likely entering on the Glacial Drumlin Trail or on County Highway B on a Jefferson County bike route. The plan notes that these cyclists benefit from direct, marked, signed, and well-maintained routes to local attractions. So they're not necessarily familiar with our community, and so are relying on that infrastructure and that signage to bring them to points of interest. They're going to rely on bicycle parking because they're visitors to the community and need a place to store their bike while they're enjoying the amenities that we have here. Main Street, Lake Street, and Madison Street are identified as the most important visitor corridors. So Lake Mills is home to 3 public schools and 2 private schools. The Lake Mills Area School District enrolls over 1,500 students. I didn't have up-to-date information on the private schools. So sidewalks are specifically stated in here that they're not typically appropriate or safe bicycle routes due to their conflicts with driveways. Residential streets with minimal traffic are considered to provide safer conditions for younger school children, so those less experienced with bicycling and who want a calmer environment to traverse the community. But older students that have more experience may benefit with more direct routes through streets as they age and gain experience. And then it states that education and awareness for young cyclists and drivers is essential to ensure that they're sharing the road properly and that we're maintaining a safe environment for all users of the road. Destination-oriented cyclists, they're often called commuting cyclists as well, which are benefiting from direct, marked, and well-maintained routes along major corridors. And these cyclists are going to want adequate on-street accommodations, are going to be especially important to them. So they're likely to be riding during peak hour traffic time and are the least likely to detour or go to less busy routes because they have a destination in mind and a time in which they want to arrive there. Recreational cyclists, they may be less experienced and less comfortable interacting with vehicles and may prefer the tranquility of calmer streets, and they may not be as interested in the most direct route to their destination, and they would benefit from a network of routes on bicycle paths that are off-road as well as local streets. So they may not have a destination at all, and they may simply be enjoying bicycling for recreation. And then finally, pedestrians, and it simply notes that the city should be aware of and monitoring how pedestrians are interacting with both vehicular and bicycle traffic. And then it moves into routing. So it identifies 3 different ways of routing through the community for bicycle: paths, local streets, and arterial streets. Paths, the benefits it states from them. So paths are dedicated to non-motorized travel and are an important piece of the citywide network. And these properly designed paths provide safe, direct, and pleasant travel between destinations. They accommodate cyclists, pedestrians, and other users, and are often the preferred route for recreational cyclists and younger children. Some of the drawbacks, it may not always be practical. You have to acquire additional right-of-way oftentimes to put them in. They're not necessarily always direct, so it may not improve safety for cyclists that are seeking the most direct route to their destination. Paths can increase vehicle conflict, so paths adjacent to roadways are discouraged in this plan as drivers may fail to yield when they're turning onto or off of a side street and may not be anticipating having bicycle traffic that's off the roadway also trying to cross at that time. There's some concern that paths send the message that roads are only for cars, which is not the case, and that discontinuous paths can result in bicyclists going onto sidewalks or riding against traffic in order to maintain their route. And that paths are not always necessary, and that neighborhood streets can offer low speed and low traffic volumes, and that bicycle lanes may sometimes be more appropriate on busier streets if parking is removed. Local streets, so neighborhood streets are also considered a critical component of the citywide network within the plan, and they connect homes to trails and other routes. Motor vehicle speeds are more compatible with bicycle speeds. There's a lower traffic volume and a lower frequency of interaction between vehicles and bicyclists. Narrow street width and on-street parking encourage cyclists to ride towards the center, limiting the pinching, as the plan calls it, of vehicles trying to overtake cyclists, and so forcing them between parked cars or others that if they're in the center of the road, the car can't overtake them. Residential environments are often more comfortable, and these local streets are often preferred by schools, children, and less experienced cyclists. Then we have arterial streets. These often provide the most direct route to a destination and are preferred by destination-oriented and experienced cyclists. An example is a commuter. On rural highways, it states that 4 feet of paved shoulder can accommodate these cyclists, and on city through streets, 14-foot curb lanes without markings can accommodate more experienced cyclists. However, the addition of bike lanes on through streets is one of the best and most cost-effective strategies to accommodate cyclists. On existing arterials, the addition of lanes often requires the removal of on-street parking. And then it specifically discusses parking restrictions so that the removal of on-street parking can provide additional width to be used for bicycle lanes and improve cyclist safety. Some of the obstacles that it lays out, you can see there is parking is an amenity for some adjacent residents and businesses. Parking can calm traffic because it narrows the vision of the driver on the road. Pedestrians may have to cross a wider lane of moving traffic because the stationary vehicles have been removed. And the lack of bicycle facilities may create false perception that the street lacks demand for bicycles. So the fact that there's not a bicycle lane on a street currently likely means that people aren't biking on that street because the facilities that they would prefer and would make them more comfortable don't exist. Since they're not biking on that street, non-bicyclists may determine that means bicyclists don't want to bike on that street, and that may be an erroneous conclusion based on the lack of facilities. Its conclusion on parking restrictions is that the community must balance providing a safe and direct corridor for moving bicycle traffic with accommodating stationary vehicles. So what is that balance between the occasional stationary vehicle and the ability for cyclists to use the road in a safer manner with bike lanes being added? It then moves on to what recommended improvements exist. I won't read them all, but you can see it has recommended routes, bicycle lanes, installation of bicycle lanes. It has some bicycle trails that are recommended as well. And then it also has a recommendation that the city should simply make an effort to require bicycle parking spaces, but then also install parking spaces in public areas that it has control over. So when the plan, as it nears its conclusion, is kind of considering that when fully implemented, the proposed improvements that were listed above would create a system of routes. This would consist of neighborhood streets, bicycle lanes, and multi-use trails connecting homes, schools, parks, and businesses. These routes could be signed, named, and promoted. It does list the disadvantage of formally designating routes, and that it may lead some to believe that bicyclists are restricted to such routes. Marked routes may embolden less experienced cyclists and make them be less aware, and that marked routes containing hazards may present maintenance and potential for claims and liability issues, so there needs to be a commitment to the maintenance of those routes. It encourages the creation of a bicycle map and education to promote routes that the city may designate and help cyclists make their travel decisions. Posting those maps at key locations, and then when distributing it, provides an opportunity for the city to also include education on bicycle safety and additional resources. It includes some recommendations for facility maintenance that should be a point of emphasis if the city wants to commit to being a bicycle-friendly community. You can read them there. I won't run through each of them. And so we get to the bicycle plan's conclusion, which is largely geared towards that bicyclists are common in Lake Mills, but the plan concludes that bicycle facilities are not. The Glacial Drumlin Trail and Jefferson County bike routes lead visitors to the city's outskirts, but it did not consider that additional bike lanes and signs could connect them to the commercial heart of our community. And then it reiterates that the neighborhood streets, bicycle lanes, and bike trails, a combination of bicycle facilities, is going to form a continuous network that can connect our community together. That the bicycle maps and signs can help residents find and plan their routes. That the commitment to maintenance will be necessary to ensure that we can continue to accommodate cyclists, and that we should continue with a commitment to education to provide the public with the tools to share the road safely. So that is a summary of our bicycle plan as it stands now. Interested in the Public Works Board's thoughts on the bicycle plan and kind of what the vision is going into the future on, do we want to endeavor to review this at a deeper level? Perhaps we could go out to RFP for the development of a new plan. We can prioritize some of the projects that are identified in this plan currently and work off of this plan, since there are several of the improvements that have yet to be completed that are listed in the plan, and what the vision going forward is, so that staff can begin to prepare something for the board's consideration in the future.
Can you just briefly share of the recommended improvements that were noted in the plan and that you've summarized on page 15? What has been completed and what is outstanding?
Mm-hmm. Dwayne, can you help me with this?
Put you in the spot.
We have, Main Street, obviously, when that was done in 2018, bicycle lanes were added there.
South Main Street specifically.
Yes, sorry, South Main Street specifically. Do you have?
Infrastructure is there. To kind of follow up on what Drake said as far as on street would be South Main Street. Trails, there's a number of new ones, American Way, connected to the Drumlin Trail spur. There are some through the industrial park and into the Arbor Creek development. We've included in our recent SDP application for a trail down Stony Road and to North CP Avenue to connect the Plainview Terrace area to the Owen Street, Polk Street area. Again, that hasn't been constructed, but it has been included in SDP grant applications. Drake, feel free to step in here as we're answering this question.
It's not a lot.
But as far as full signage, as far as bike lane markings throughout the city, there isn't very many of those, and I think that if you go back to that other meeting packet, there'll be information with regard to that. There were pictures on some of the signage that is out there, and then there's information in that spreadsheet. And I will find the exact date for you. I do believe it was the September 22 meeting.
So I think council's looking for direction from this board on, is the current plan viable? Is it still relevant? Does there need to be updating? And if it does need to be updated, I guess it would be our responsibility to update that and forward that to council and say, this is our recommendation moving forward. I guess as I look at these recommended improvements that comes directly from the 2005 plan, I think most of this is still relevant. We just haven't done much over the last 18 years, and it would be great to do something with the plan that's been in place for the last 18 years.
I would agree that the network doesn't change, right? The street network doesn't change dramatically from 2005 to today.
Right.
And so I would agree with that. And then looking at that spreadsheet that was created, at least it was September of 22, that was meant to give a baseline to this board of where we stand in comparison to what the recommendations were.
So I've emailed this spreadsheet to each of you, that you can review.
I think
we don't have a lot of on-street bicycle lanes currently on our streets. I've only been here a year, but South Main Street strikes me as one of the few that we have. Lake Street has some. When you get into the county-owned areas, has some, I guess you call it paved shoulders, that are, may not be considered perfectly adequate currently for them, but do exist. And then the non-paved, there's a multi-use path along American Way, a 10-foot wide multi-use path that eventually becomes an unpaved, is it gravel or path, and then actually ends a little bit before it gets to the end of American Way due to a lack of right-of-way and lack of an easement to continue that forward. So I think, Mr. Waters, you're correct that there's a number of things listed in this plan that were identified as potential improvements that we have not accomplished as far as adding those facilities. Whether the routes may exist, but we have not added the facilities to make them more bicycle friendly.
Is there anything we can do on the plan that would maybe give more direction? Like if you're looking at East Lake Street, Madison, Main, or Tyrena Park, would it make sense to clarify maybe what those streets would look like if we added bike lanes, or is that getting too deep into it at this point?
I think we could relatively easily, bring to this board what the width of that street is, where parking currently is, and what addition of a bike lane may do to what's currently enjoyed on that street.
Current structure.
And show what that change of condition would look like. I think we could do that relatively easily.
Does it make sense?
How does that differ from the detail that's already in the 2005 report? Because there were some specific proposals, like on East Lake Street, restrict the on-street parking on both sides, restripe. It does have some pretty specific detail, so I don't want to make sure we're not reinventing what was
I guess
documented. Now
that's what I'm
it's
asking for, is
reassessing.
maybe an update of that assessment.
Yeah, so
Because technology's changed and thought process has changed.
Yeah, we would probably take a look at we'll look at what's in the current plan and kind of evaluate it against what current best practices might be to see if there's any differences and see if there's been any different conclusions drawn on those streets' viability for bicycle traffic or other things, and see if anything has changed and bring back what it would look like to add to the board. So we'll evaluate it for if it still is contemporary, essentially.
Have we, Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What I was going to say is I think what we're discussing is a logical next step and was kind of my intention with the spreadsheet in the first place was to show what was there and then at least show that some of the information needs to be double checked on the width, make sure that the conditions still exist the same way they were in 2005. But then also show what is the effect, right? If we put the bike lane in, what does that do to the parking and in which blocks? And not every street and not every street has the same width on every block. And so just putting a bike lane in might fit in one block, but then the next block potentially could be wider or narrower. I think the generalities that are in some of those cross sections in the report may not look at every block and every width.
So we might be able to keep parking on some blocks, but maybe not all blocks type of thing.
And that's some of the detail, and that's going to take some time. And so maybe what I would like to ask is, are there some routes to maybe minimize, or maybe a route or two that you would like us to look at to give an example of how we want to move forward? Because looking at all 9, or I'm sorry, how many routes there are?
I was thinking prioritize.
I was, so when we were almost talking at the same time, I think I was thinking on the same lines. I know there was a few citizens when the bicycle plan topic came to the city council had sent emails to some public work board members saying we support a bicycle plan. So have we done a focus group of any sort or done a survey? I saw a survey online as I was doing a little bit of research on how bicycle lanes are handled in other municipalities. And there was a nice small survey that I saw, just a little one. I don't know how we'd administer it quickly, but getting more input to your point around what is important and what would be top priorities, because this was kind of what I'm observing is that we have this phenomenal, it's like the comprehensive plan. It's so rich, and this is rich. It's got a lot of really comprehensive approaches to a bicycle plan, but we can't chip it off all at one time. So if we could get some really good information around what the top priorities are. Is there a school route? I know some parents, when I first joined, had expressed some concerns about getting to school. So is that a priority, a particular route or set of routes where that could be our top set of studies or proposals along the lines of school route? Or is it a particular commuter route where we have some citizens who are struggling with some safety issues? And I think if we could get some information, and you may have that already, I'm on the same, thinking along the same lines of having a few priority areas, and so we don't build something large like 2005 and then we don't accomplish as much as we'd like.
Yeah, I think, we could focus on, routes that bring you to, the downtown, the commercial, kind of the hub of the community, and on routes to schools. Those are two things that we could look at specifically and report back on existing conditions, as well as what it would look like, what certain routes to those areas might look like, and how they would be accommodated. Those are the two ones that pop into my mind.
And on the survey question, the comprehensive plan did ask a couple questions that were bicycle related, and the bicycle, I guess the community's opinion towards bicycle routes was very high. The bicycle surveyed very well on the comprehensive plan, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. But it was general questions.
Yes.
It wasn't, do you support a route on this street or on that street? It was, do you support more bicycle accessibility within Lake Mills? So it was a very general question.
Mm-hmm. And that'll be something we'll have to grapple with in the future, as well as we're considering garnering community feedback. Is it that we come up with some ideas and ask for feedback on those ideas, or is it on the front end, both have their benefits and negatives? If it's on the front end, there may be a question of they don't know where to get started. They don't know how to, start that process. If it's on the back end, then, you're putting something forward to them and saying, what do you think about it? And if they end up not liking that, you're kind of back to the drawing board. So there's pros and cons of each approach. And we'll just have to grapple with how we want to engage the public on this item moving forward.
I do like the idea of looking at the routes that take us to our commerce area of downtown, because that's where a lot of people want to go to, and you see a lot of bicycles in the downtown area already. And also school routes, of course, make the most sense. So I think what you said earlier,
I agree.
Mr. Daly, makes a lot of sense, and I think that's where we should focus to begin with.
Okay, and we'll try and collect some information on public bicycle parking that's available as well. We'll try and make that a piece of it as well.
And if I would ask, if you do, when you do look at the spreadsheet and the routes and there are certain ones that you want us to focus on, please let Mr. Daly know so that we can focus on a particular one or three versus the entirety of the city.
The entire map?
Yes, thank you.
Can I ask another bike question? The increasing popularity of electric bikes, e-bikes, are there any new, since 2005 when they weren't probably available or popular, are there any new requirements, guidelines, concerns? They go to higher speed, they have, they're in a different category, they're a bike. But I'm I'm asking the question because I don't know the answer, but I think that is something we should also be thinking about as we're talking about a plan, and whether it does or doesn't change our thought about anything.
In general, they're allowed on bicycle routes.
Yes, I know.
And bicycle trails.
But I don't know if there are any, as we look back, it's a little bit to assessing what was in here. If you look back, would you do the same thing, knowing that those bicycles are also now a part of the mix? I just know they're faster, and there are more injuries, and but does that mean the way you plan around them is any different? I don't know.
Yep, we'll do our best. There's categories to e-bikes as well, from pedal assist to self-propelling. So it is definitely a changed environment since 2005.
It wasn't mentioned, but the wheeled boards and other things are along those same lines. Those, yes.
Scooters and skateboards.
There are some new scooters. There are some scooters and like bird-looking things I've noticed in the city also. They're not birds, but they're bird-like. People zipping on bird-like things.
They're privately owned.
Privately owned, bird-like things, yeah.
Not public.
Correct.
Yeah.
So with everything else going on in the city, how will this get attention, and when will you have more information? And is there anything the board can do to keep this on the towards the front burner? Don't all speak at once.
We will do our best to bring some form of update to the board at the next meeting as well, whether it will be fully comprehensive or fully what you're looking for. Perhaps not, but we will bring back, it'll remain on the agenda. We'll bring back some additional information, and we'll keep working towards it so it doesn't get lost.
Sounds good, thank you. Anything else? Anybody on this one?
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, don't forget you had the director's report too.
I know, what's next? All right, with that, we'll skip back to item 5, which we skipped earlier, the director's report. Thanks, Drake.
I'll be leaving, but if any questions come up, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dave, can you pull up presentation number 1, please? So this past month in Public Works, to give a summary description, it's been preparation for the winter. Most departments are getting equipment ready, getting our infrastructure ready for the winter months. However, 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago on, what was it, October 23rd, I believe, on a Monday, early Monday morning, we came into 2 water breaks. This one is on Main Street, obviously right in front of Commons Park. Right off of the main, as we are starting a lateral into one of the businesses there, we had a break in the pipe, and a lot of the overburden washed up, and so we quickly shut off the valves on on the north and south ends. Then at the same time, simultaneously, we had a break at the Rock Lake Manor, Immediately, we went to Rock Lake Manor first. We handled that, and then about noon, we got to this one. Next slide, please, Dave. And here you can just see all that sand washed up that was backfill material along the water main. Next, please. And this is now we're dewatering the trench. This gives it's right about in the middle there where the break was. Next, please. But we were able to fix the pipe that day. We reestablished water around 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This is the restoration. This picture was taken a few days ago where we were able to grade the area again and replace the concrete that was destroyed. The water department here is also dealing with someone hit the hydrant. This is on Industrial Drive. They don't normally look that way. But this hydrant performed the way it's supposed to. It broke right where it was supposed to. And it did not affect the shoe and open up the valve down low. So, next slide. This is the water department crew working on it. We are, by the way, down to just 2 people. We are understaffed by 1 currently, and we are looking to fill that position. Street department's very busy. This is our vac truck. We're spending a lot. We just finished our brush pickup that ended yesterday. But we are busy vacuuming the leaves. We have the street sweeper out every day now. We will continue to vac up leaves until snow starts falling. Currently, this truck is out of service. We hope to have it back in action by Monday. But it gets a lot of wear and tear this time of year, and with all the mechanical parts, some have failed, but we do think we know where the problem is. But
If I remember right, you have one on budget for next year?
I don't know, I'm sorry, Mr. Waters.
I think you do.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you do, so.
This one's been around a while, I think.
I am catching
I
up
remember
with-
asking the question during budget
I didn't bring
review,
John to just
what are you going to do with the
yeah,
old
this-
one? So,
I'm always of the mind, I think we have more value keeping an older model in order to, for one, use it for the grunt work. We normally get more value than resale in that. So when we are able to get a new piece of equipment, I like to preserve the depreciation on that new piece of equipment by still using the old one for as long as we can.
okay.
So,
If you have room in the garage, though.
yes, absolutely. This is our street sweeper. So these are the primary activities for the street department. Next slide, please. And then we wrapped up all of our concrete work that we were doing, all our patchwork, all our the distressed sidewalk panels that were marked for removal and replacement. Next slide, please. That has been completed for the season. Next. And then wastewater, they're doing, their primary job right now is doing a lot of televising of the existing infrastructure and a lot of jetting. This is our vac truck, which also has a jetting unit on it. They'll send this snake up into the, about 100 lineal feet perhaps, or 250, whatever it is, to the next manhole. They turn on the jets and they start pulling it back, and this washes out the system. And then they can vac up what is accumulated in the sump of that manhole. And that's what this gentleman's doing here, Jim. Next, please. Now, this is televising. That's what he's about to lower down into the manholes, what we call a robot. And it has a camera on it. And he'll put this down there. You'll see as Devin is in the front of the cab, and he's getting ready to jump onto the computer and direct the robot and then record what we're seeing. Next, please. And next. And then Jim and I are watching that. Oh, go back one, please. I'm sorry. Jim and I are watching what's on that camera up there in the top center, a little to the left. This is very valuable. We are able to see any potential problems maybe forming in the pipe. We're able to determine the age of the pipe and the stress it's under, or if there's any stressful situations within that pipe. And then also if we see there needs to be jetted or cleaned, or if there's something in there that doesn't belong, such as roots or an animal, something like that. Next, please. The electric department's also very busy. Here we're installing a service into a new residence. Their crew is wrapping up here. But then they're also, next please, they're doing a lot of tree trimming. This is important because come winter when we get some heavy wet snows, it's going to knock a lot of these branches down into our lines. This can also often be dangerous work. So we'll always have 2 or 3 people on site, one always down on the ground. But you'll see Luke here is the power lines, let me get my, all right, below him there. So he's working above and trying to trim these branches so they don't ever fall down onto the power lines. Next, please. Now here, this is they're installing underground wire versus the overhead. And a critical point of this is trying to identify any existing utilities that are already in the ground. We do this by potholing. We're using a vac truck again, and we're basically excavating with water, high-pressured water. And as they're loosening the soil, they're vacuuming it up that truck, and this enables us to locate existing utilities without rupturing them. But it can be very dirty work. Next, please. And this unhappy looking person has mud on his face because this is Austin, a very capable lineman, but he's doing this work because he realizes how important it is to identify the existing utilities, but he's had happier days. This person's always happy. Kennedy's installing an electric meter into a new residence here. Next, please. And she's about to give them power. Next. New projects coming up. We have the College Street project is wrapped up. We just recently did a walkthrough, Dwayne and I did, forming punch lists. There are some problems with that project. We are requiring the contractor to raise some low manholes. That is one of the bigger issues we've had. There are about 4 or so that we believe were set just too low when they paved. So they've presented us with a plan for cutting out around the manholes and raising them. We like the system they're going to use, and we think it'll be a good product at the end, but it is something they need to do. We do not consider this project complete yet. And the TAP grant project, the sidewalk project primarily, is going to be pushed off to next year.
Why is that?
I feel it's too late in the season.
Yeah.
When you're pouring concrete, a key component of that concrete forming is the hydration forming. That generates heat. And so that's why you can do cold weather concreting, but when you're doing flat work where it's only 4 inches thick and it has a wide surface, the cold ground and the cold air just sucks the heat out of there and does not hydrate properly. So you will not get the proper strength you're supposed to in that mix. So the cold can retard the hydration is what really happens there.
So what time next year do you think?
We'll have to have a meeting on that and see what's best for the city and the contractor.
Okay.
It's ultimately up to the contractor, I believe, so.
Is there a time frame on that grant money? Do we have to have it done in a certain time period?
There is a sunset date, but I think we have a couple of years.
I think the contract has a deadline of, I believe it's August of next year. I'd have to double check the contract.
Okay.
But our contract with that contractor that was signed, I believe it was through the summer of 24.
Okay.
And if I may, I just want to clarify a couple terms that were used, and I have been scrambling to look at our CIP plan. Mr. Waters, you mentioned the leaf vac. So the leaf vac is actually in 28. And what I would like to double check with what the piece of equipment you're thinking of might be the hydrovac. So there's a hydrovac, which Randy did show, which is to pothole, and then there are also the televising and televising cleaning, the cleaning vac truck for the treatment plant. And so they're all similar types of pieces of equipment, but they do something a little bit different. They all have a little bit of a vacuum piece to it. So I would like to clarify which one you were speaking of that you're saying is in 24.
24 is the wastewater treatment truck that was pictured earlier?
Yes. Okay, I just, and I am
confused. Thank you for
and I wasn't trying to point, I was more concerned that there was something in error in the budget and CIP document than I was concerned that you.
And I thought we're getting a new leaf vacuum.
Yeah, it is, we call it a vac truck, but it is not a leaf vacuum truck, so.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize. I hope I didn't, that didn't come across the wrong way, Mr. Waters.
No, thank you. Is there anything else?
Not for Public Works update, unless you had any questions.
Any questions?
No, but I would like to make a comment. I really like how you're representing the team and the people doing the work and the photos. I'm a visual person, and I can connect now that I'm like, oh, that's what they're doing when I'm
Sure.
driving by. I really appreciate it, and I think you may want to consider, I think it'd be cool to have an article in the newspaper, or on the Facebook, or on the website or something, because I think there'd be a lot of people who would be interested in understanding more about what happens in the city, honestly. I think high school kids, I'm like, oh, I think this is fascinating, and I didn't think I would find it as interesting. I'm like, you're showing me the pictures, I'm like, oh, that's cool, you're putting a camera down there,
Yeah.
and you're looking for roots and animals, like, that's kind of cool. I just something for consideration. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot to be proud of here, and you're showing it with some cool pictures and people that are spending their time making our city beautiful, and it's always the stuff that you don't think about, but it's important. So
Well,
just wanted to say a shout out. It's awesome. I like
Glad
what
to
you're
hear
doing.
that. I love talking about what we do. I'm a nerd about construction and Public Works, and I could talk about it all day. I love educating people on just everything that goes in and all the human effort that goes into this. You know, from conception to the actual doing the physical work out in the field, so. Absolutely.
Shout out. Just I had a little marketing campaign for your group. It's awesome. It's awesome stuff.
Okay.
Mary mentioning televising reminded me I was going to say something about the wastewater is so much easier to inspect than the water utility, the water pipes.
Yes, absolutely.
And
We can't do something like that with water lines.
Unfortunately. And as I assume you know that water has the issue of leaking.
Yes.
And we're, correct me, Dwayne, are we still above the DNR recommendation for water leakage?
As of 22, we were very, very close last year. Unfortunately, I haven't completely reviewed with Harold the 23 information, but there have been a number of events that cause concern for me that will show that, but are explainable. And I think that's what's reduced in the last couple of years, is the water department has done a great job of finding many of those leaks and finding ways that we've been calculating what is a loss. For example, the fire department doing training and keeping track of that. The ice rink usage, and having a better handle on how much that usage is.
Okay.
And being able to quantify whether it's a loss that we don't know where it is versus a loss that we understand. We flush the hydrants to clean the system, and that's a acceptable loss.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a discharge that's on purpose but isn't billed versus a unknown loss,
Unplanned, yeah.
unplanned, unknown, yeah.
Correct. And in our conversations with the DNR in the past, they were looking for improvement. And the water department has shown improvement over a number of years.
Yes.
Are we at 15% as of December of 22? We were not, but we were very close. So
Kudos for the team for all that hard work, and keep up the good work.
thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Good, thank you.
All right. Next is item 10, presentation, introduction to the Lake Mills Water Utility.
So towards the end of our last board meeting, the topic of the radon remediation was brought up. And so Dwayne and I looked into that, thought we could just give you a little data, but then Drake also was talking to me about perhaps at every board meeting, giving just a maybe 10-minute instructional lecture on different aspects of public works. I've been doing this a long time. I've created a lot of pictures and diagrams, and so we thought we could start that out by tonight. Tonight's will be very simple, but Dwayne pulled up for me a board meeting you had this past June that seemed to be very informative about the quality of your drinking water here. I thought I'd give you just a little, some of the results from what we found with the radon testing, but then explain to you why Lake Mills has such good drinking water. There's some very real reasons why, and we can look into that. Just for some data, were you about to say something? I'm sorry.
I just want to clarify that we're saying radium versus radon. And the radium was, I just want to make sure that that's what you meant.
I beg your pardon. I didn't mean radon.
I apologize to correct you, but that was the number you pulled up, was radium, that you showed me earlier.
Okay. Well, we are testing quarterly for radon, correct? Well, I consider them synonymous, but.
Well, one produces the other, so they're certainly related.
Yes. We are testing quarterly. We are below the contaminant level. And actually, just this past Tuesday, we took our last quarterly test and submitted that sample. So we'll get that data in soon. And this data is up for basically anyone can view it on the DNR's website. But the first quarter test results are 1.89 PCIs, picocurie per liter. The second quarter was 2.77, and the third quarter was 3.63 PCIs per liter.
And the limit is 4?
5.
5, okay.
So I just wanted to share that with you. This is, again, like I say, we'll have our sample results back in, I would think, within a few days. But what else was I going to say on the radon? Oh, I did then pull up and I talked to the engineer who was part of the remediation, so I thought I'd just describe what was done with that well number 4 that was trending higher. If you can go to the next slide, Dave, please. So this is a typical schematic of a well, and it's typical for around here. And well number 4 is similar, except much deeper. And I'm just going to go to the overhead projector here, if I may.
So the well is actually, I want to say, hundreds of feet deep? Yeah.
Well number 4 was originally 800. All 3 wells are ranging around 800. And I'm going to bring up why this is such an advantage for Lake Mills, having such deep wells.
Yeah.
But what has happened, what they did for remediation here is they abandoned a portion, the bottom portion of of well number 4. Well number 4 being around 800 feet. The bottom 100 feet, the bottom 70 feet. Oh, where am I?
You're off the page, just like.
Sorry, I'm trying to talk and not look at. Okay. There we go.
There you go.
The bottom 70 feet were backfill with pea gravel, and then the next 40 feet were backfill with a cementitious slurry, like a grout. And then to do this, they pulled up the intake, they backfilled that and abandoned the bottom 100 feet. Also, prior to that, I mean, there was some speculation that this radon might have been sourced from bacteria. So they acid washed it and shocked it with chlorine. And then we started getting very low numbers. So that was what happened there. That happened between 2017 and 2019, I think. If you happen to know, I'm sorry to look at you for an answer.
That's okay. I think the test result that caused the over 5, I believe, was in December of 2017. A number of different analysis was done through 18, 19, and ultimately this filling occurred, I believe it was in March of 2020, right during COVID, actually, if I recall correctly.
So Dave, if you can go back to the presentation, please, and the next slide.
Oh, beautiful.
One advantage we have here in this area is we have a very deep layer of sandstone. As opposed to up north, your wells typically, I remember we were trying to get a well at around 85 feet deep. Here we're going 800. And what is so nice about that is, next slide please, if I can get to the, okay, oh boy, you're not going to see that. All right. Well, this is a soil log, and I grew up in a soils lab, and I love reading the data. The previous slide, please, Dave. Why Lake Mills is sitting in such a good position, why our water is so clean right now, is the top 30 feet or so is a lean, cohesive clay, primarily. They have it titled as clay with dolomite. This makes clay kind of sort of fatty, and this creates a good liner. Typically, in my past, when I've had to do liners for retention ponds, detention ponds, or even for waste sites, we would use a lean clay like this. This makes it harder for chemicals such as PFAS right now to migrate too deep into the strata. It takes time to work its way up, like PFAS and the other contaminants normally are going to be with water and they'll migrate down with water. But with the clay, it's hard to penetrate that. But then the real benefit comes when you get down to about 150 feet to 180, you get into this naturally filtering siltstone and sandstone. And we have about 400 feet in depth of that. And this is a very natural filtration system. It's not so unfamiliar to, today we're trying now to treat PFAS with granular activated carbon, and it's not so different from sandstone. PFAS has a very strong covalent bond, so it doesn't chemically bond to anything else. But they use granular activated carbon because it has so many capillaries or cells hoping to catch the PFAS molecules. Sandstone is very similar. So it just takes thousands of years for contaminants to reach what are, our clean raw water. And that is why Lake Mills is sitting in such a good position versus other communities. You go further south, they have even harder, thicker stratas of clay. So their well water has to be closer to the surface. When you're closer to the surface, because the water can't, there's not as many reservoirs deep down. And when you're dealing with water that's closer to the surface, these are waters that are more susceptible to migration from contaminants from the surface. Next slide, please, and the next. And so this just gives you an idea, a profile of how deep the sandstone aquifer is here in this area. I pulled this off of Madison's website, I believe. And we have, our strata profile is very similar to this diagram here. Well, we'll have our surface layer is a little thicker. We have about 30, 40 feet of clay material, brown, gray, silty clays. And then we have some glacial tailings of cobbles, and dolomite. But then you have just such a large strata of sandstone. So I think we are in a good position. Water does migrate or travel horizontally at times, and that's something we'll have to pay attention to. But this was just a quick little lecture I thought we could give on just why we are in, such an advantageous situation geologically for clean water.
Except for radon and radium are naturally occurring.
Yes, they are. It's something you have to pay attention to. I was fascinated learning about, just growing up, to me, radon came from monolithic rock slabs. I never really knew it could come from a bacteria, so.
Yeah, I don't know how that could work. I'm thinking the bacteria were storing it somehow, but, bacteria can't create an element like radium or radon. But, a popular thing now that people didn't know about 20 years ago or more is radon infiltration into basements in this area.
Yeah.
And so I now have a radon mitigation system in my home. It's part of the soil structure here.
Is that a membrane type?
Well, the radon mitigation for homes, what they do is they put a hole in the concrete slab and then they pull a vent, power fan to continuously pull air from underneath the slab.
So the air away from.
So that the radon goes out a vent instead of into the basement.
Okay. I was thinking, and I'll develop this as I get to know everyone better, but if you have topics you would like to know more about, you can certainly tell me, or I was thinking on our next meeting, we can discuss the water conveyance system, from our welds to why we have a water tower to begin with, and just a delivery to all the different their customers in Lake Mills. But if there's ever a topic, just let me know and we can prepare something for that. But that was all I had for this, so.
Can I ask a question back from the very beginning when you were bringing up the 3 measurements for this year? You had 1 point something, and then what were the 3 measurements for the quarters, quarter 1, 2, and 3?
1.89 for quarter 1, 2.77 for quarter 2, and 3.63 for quarter 3.
So you have 3 points all going up in a row, and so 3 points can make a line. Like 2 doesn't necessarily make a line.
Does look like a trend.
It's kind of like, so does that, so just curious your thoughts on, is that of concern? It's under 5, but it's moving in the increased direction. Does that happen seasonally? So is it always down low in the first quarter, and then it moderates higher, and then by the time you get, I don't know, I'm just curious because when I hear 3 going up, and I'm like, it's getting closer to 5, is there something that, what do you do? How do you look at that, and does it cause alarm, or?
Dwayne was pulling up some historical data, and there have been trends up and down.
It fluctuates.
Yes, but you want to speak?
I can. It is, has been creeping up each cycle, but to that point, and to the point that was being discussed, in the summer quarter, that test has been higher than most in the past. So it'll be interesting to see what this test in the next week or two, will it track back down like it has in the last couple of years?
Okay.
But at the same time, they are tracking ever so slightly up from where they were back in 2020.
We'll look at what the DNR's procedure is when we start approaching or surpassing the warning limit.
Yeah.
Do we take action right away, or will we just start monitoring it maybe 8 times a year or something? Just, look for a trend that way.
Is the sample for the whole city system, or is it for per well?
Do you know?
I believe it's per well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would assume it's just well 4.
And what happened last time, and so the DNR looks at that 5 is not necessarily one single 5, it's an average of the four quarters. And what happened in May of 17, we had a reading of 6.5. And what that did is ultimately then brought the average in 1 quarter of that 4-quarter average to 5.5, which then required the consent order that the DNR contacted us and said, look at remediation at that time.
Do you do a rolling 4-quarter average?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the DNR does a rolling
Yeah, well,
4-quarter
yeah, that's what
average.
we're.
Right.
Okay.
And so that 6.5 back in 17
Yeah.
created much of that issue that led to the filling of the well, or the bottom of the well. So again, as Randy has mentioned, the last 3 have been well below 5, so that rolling average is still well below 5. And maybe to add again, it is picocuries per liter. It is pretty small. While there is a limit, right? We are talking about a small portion in comparison to a liter of water.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else on that topic?
Not from me, I'm sorry. Oh.
All right. Then we are on to item 11, recommendation for future agendas.
So I know that the 2 that we mentioned in the meeting was the return on the the yard waste center and the bike plan. I'm sure we'll be talking wastewater treatment plan as well.
Yes.
So those 3 will be continued on the agenda.
While we're talking about the bike plan, we didn't ever swing back around on a sidewalk policy. We were, I think it got bumped back up here, and then I'm not sure that was back in.
I'm trying to recall.
June.
Was that, I think City Council asked for a review of the sidewalk policy. I'm not 1,000% sure there.
Well, when we had the College Street conversation, the sidewalk policy came up as a point of conversation because the policy had made us, we kind of veered from the policy with the decision on College Street. So then I have in my notes that it came back this direction unless it was resolved somewhere else, that we were to discuss the sidewalk.
Well, I know it's
policy.
an area of concern still within the community because I get feedback from the community on issues like this, and that's been a topic as of late. So it's something we should look at.
And it complements the bike policy in some regard, because you had the pedestrian, I know, was one of the subsets in the 2005 plan, and I'm not sure where it stands as far as criticality or how quick we have to get at it, but it's just something on the radar screen. It's a little bit of keeping it at least where we have it earmarked out for an agenda perhaps that's not heavy with other subjects. It might be one we could bring forward to just readdress.
This may be an answer on, I believe you're both correct, but I think maybe the answer comes in because Milton Street was pushed off for another year and Milton Street does not have a gap in the sidewalk. We're really talking about the next time that issue would come up, would it be at least in 26?
So it's 3 years out.
So and I think that may have been
Why it
hasn't come back.
Perfect.
But we can definitely check in on that. So I've got sidewalk, wastewater treatment plant, bike routes.
Yard waste.
Excuse me?
Yard waste.
Yard waste, thank you.
And hopefully we'll have voting quorum on making a recommendation on that wastewater treatment plant, because that's, I guess, the next step there.
And I'm absent in December.
Okay.
So I'm hoping we'll have our other members, but I will meet with Mark and provide I always provide questions or commentary in advance.
Yes. Unfortunately, you cannot vote in absentia on a board.
Correct. I know. I
Yeah.
cannot vote, but I can at least
Sure, provide input.
input.
Yep. Very good.
I don't think it'll be ready for December, but I think in the near horizon will be the first round of the survey from Milton Street. And discussions on what the electric utility will be doing. That might be January, February as part of the 24 electric proposed moves. But I believe Matt mentioned this morning that survey's been complete, but the information is not yet available, so.
All right. And I don't,
It's a lot of good stuff.
yeah. All right, let's move on then, and last item, adjournment. I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.